Let's bring in senior Capitol Hill reporter, host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale. She was up there in Chappaqua, New York yesterday covering Hillary Clinton's deposition. We'll be back there today to cover the testimony of former President Clinton. So, Ali, there's so much to go through here. First of all, the fact that Republicans even were there. We'll remind our viewers that last week they couldn't be bothered to attend the deposition of Les Wexner, the billionaire who most definitely had a years-long relationship funding Jeffrey Epstein. They couldn't show up for that one, but they all made it to Chappaqua. Lauren Boebert, the congresswoman, taking a photo from inside the deposition against the rules, releasing it to a podcaster who then publicized it. What was your takeaway from being up there, first of all, and hearing from Secretary Clinton afterward?
Well, look, any excuse to go back home to Westchester County for me. But at the same time, I don't think I anticipated, Willie, that this hearing, when a source told me that they were talking about UFOs and Pizzagate, I actually had to double check. Really? Is that actually how they're spending their time here? Because it felt so blatantly political. And I felt like the politics were very much on display yesterday with Secretary Clinton. I think the dynamics are very different today when you consider the fact that former President Clinton actually does have valid questions to answer. And my understanding of what was said in that deposition, and I do think we're going to get the transcript and the video, according to Comer, who has been releasing them within 24 hours of so of these depositions happening. My understanding is that even as Clinton went in the room and said, I never knew Jeffrey Epstein, I never went to the island and never flew on the plane, her answer when she was asked about that by Republican members of the committee was, you have to ask my husband. And so now the committee will get that chance. And so the dynamics are quite different. And I think some of the things that he's going to be pressed on include how funding for the Clinton Global Initiative came to be. Hillary Clinton, of course, was a senator during that point. So again, walled off from what was happening there. And I think that that means the dynamics today are quite different. But I also think that the events of the last 2 days really do open the door for Democrats to cry more loudly about the need to call President Trump in front of the committee. Comer and Republicans keep pivoting to this idea that Trump answers questions about this regularly in the media, despite the fact that when he gets questions about this, he typically just lashes out at reporters for asking them and doesn't truly engage with the substance. And yet, I think there is this clamoring to get Trump. And I will also say, I asked Chairman Comer, in the spirit of nonpartisanship, as he keeps saying, do you want to talk to the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick? And he actually said to me yesterday, that's probably likely, which is a notable and different response than I've gotten in the past.
And it was just yesterday, there had been a photograph of Lutnick on Epstein Island with Jeffrey Epstein and others that had appeared in the DOJ material, suddenly pulled down yesterday, raising all sorts of questions there. But that was noteworthy, that it was the first time that it seemed like this committee was interested in probing into Trump's orbit, though perhaps not the president himself. And Joe Mika, I mean, yes, to Ali's point, President Clinton will face some questions today, although I'm certain while he does so, legitimate questions, he'll also redirect and say, well, I was president many, many years ago, decades ago. There should be someone else in the office right now who be focused concern. And Secretary Clinton made those points yesterday. I just want to read a little bit from her opening statement, which was released. The secretary wrote this, said this: "You have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist your investigation, in order to distract attention from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers." The secretary added, guys, you have made little effort to call the people who show up most prominently in the Epstein files. And that right there is the heart of it.
Well, and of course, it is James Comer and the Republicans that caused this to happen. To give somebody with Hillary Clinton's name, her authority, her platform, to speak about this. And I think Donald Trump understood this, which said, I'm uncomfortable with this. I like both of them. And so she said yesterday, after the charade, it would get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of heinous crimes, Hillary Clinton said. She also called for Trump to be quizzed under oath and said, if this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on those press gaggles, as you were saying, and instead go to the tens of thousands of documents, Jonathan Lemire, the tens of thousands of documents that contain the name of Donald Trump and other people that work in the Trump administration now. not in 1997, 8, 9, 2000, but now in 2026, which they continue to ignore. And like you said, they're yanking down any information about Donald Trump that they think is uncomfortable. This Howard Lutnick picture, again, the Justice Department yanking that earlier picture of Lutnick down. They're doing it over and over again. They continue, Pam Bondi and the Justice Department continue to allow the names of rich and powerful men who write the most heinous things about young girls, young women, to be redacted.
We know, though, that he's been a little leery of this process. And, Jeff, what Chairman Comer has done here has opened the door for some very uncomfortable questions to be asked in a similar deposition down the road to a Secretary Lutnick, perhaps even to a President Trump. Let's say the Democrats take control of the House come this fall. But I think if we'll see what happens today. But if this was meant to be a statement to distract from what's happened with President Trump and his team and Epstein, it seems to be, like other efforts earlier this year, only backfiring for Republicans.
How many times has President Trump said to reporters when we ask him about this issue, it's time for America to move on. There's nothing in there. I'm exonerated. It's time to move on. At a time when the White House wants President Trump to be talking about the economy, on a day when he's going to Texas to talk about the economy, at a time in the year when the midterm elections are just a few months away and his poll numbers are down, what does the White House want him and Republicans to be talking about? Not Jeffrey Epstein. What are they doing? They're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, and they're giving a platform to somebody who knows how to play them. And Secretary Clinton did that yesterday. Did they think she wasn't going to come out and talk afterwards? Did they think that she wasn't going to put out her talking points or her opening remarks on social media beforehand? That she knows how to do this, and
she's good at this.
She's been around the block, and she's raising all of those questions, which are, as you rightly said, exactly the questions that President Trump he wants to move on from, and the focus is turning to him, and the focus is turning to him because his fellow Republican Party members are leading it there.
And some of those Republicans, Allie, are now beginning to speak out because they see what we've been talking about for a long time, that this just isn't going away. Republican senators calling for more transparency from Attorney General Pam Bondi after reports this week the Department of Justice withheld dozens of pages of documents from the Epstein files that include an assault allegation against Donald Trump, something Hillary Clinton reminded the committee of yesterday. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana told The Hill the DOJ needs to, quote, release the documents. This is not going to go away until there is full disclosure. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Chuck Grassley said, when we pass a law that says all documents need to be put out, it seems to me all documents need to be put out. Again, these are all Republicans. Senator Susan Collins of Maine said the missing files goes against the spirit of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, saying, quote, I don't know what the circumstances are and whether there's legitimate reason for redactions or withholding since he's currently in office, talking about the president, but that would seem to be contrary with the intent of the law. That's Susan Collins. Senator Tom Tillis, another Republican of North Carolina, said he had not read the reporting, but, quote, if it's in fact true, it is concerning. There's nowhere to hide on this, Ali Vitale. That's why you're seeing even Republicans now saying, hey, Pam Bondi, follow the law, put it all out there. Let these chips fall where they may. Our own supporters, the people who vote for us, they want answers on this, too. They've been calling for them for years. Do you think at some point the dam breaks and the Department of Justice actually does what it's required to do by law and put everything out there?
I'm not sure. Look, the problem with this law that passed almost unanimously, so Republicans are having a law that they themselves voted for be defied, which is partly why they're saying this. The enforcement mechanism was always going to be the problem. And other than saying in public pressure forums that the AG and the DOJ need to do more, it's not clear what they can do to enforce it, except that, as multiple Democratic House members, Mika, have reminded me, there is a subpoena that's still hanging out there from the Oversight Committee to Pam Bondi Bondi that Democratic members feel she's not in compliance with. As they were enforcing the possible contempt for the Clintons for defying a subpoena, multiple Democratic members were saying, OK, but can't we also and shouldn't we also be enforcing a subpoena for the Attorney General, trying to bring her to heel into compliance with what the committee needs? That's still a thread that's hanging out there that I'm watching to see if ultimately anything comes of, especially as now Republican senators are adding fuel to the fire around Bondi.
Well, yeah, and when you have the chairman of the judiciary and other Republicans saying they need to get out, they need to get out. And I will tell you one of the reasons they need to get out, and it's very basic. If it's not released, all right, any great trial lawyer will tell you that you let the jury know the information. You give them the bad news up front. If there's something hanging out there, as one great lawyer, trial lawyer told me, if you give the jury opportunity to think the worst, they will think the worst of your client. So right now, think about it. Right now, there are news stories all over talking about how a young woman, a minor, maybe as young as 13, 14, 15, has talked to the FBI repeatedly about the President of the United States many years ago when she was 13 or 14, doing terrible things to her. Now, if that is not true, you want to get that out. Even if it is true, it has to get out, because since the information is out there, a cover-up only makes the jury, in this case, voters, think the absolute worst.
Right.
So this is why, again, what the Justice Department has been doing has been so stupid. It's been so self-defeating, and it has only kept this story alive. I swear, we've been talking about this for 9 months now. I keep talking about they are doing damage to Donald Trump's reputation because they have so badly mishandled this. Whatever happens, the information needs to get out, because people already know about the allegations. They know about the FBI investigations. They know about the FBI interviews. So this information has to get out, not just for the sake of the young woman at the time, not for the sake of getting to the bottom of this, but politically for the president to get it out there.
I think it's too late.
Because if it doesn't get out there, again, people will assume that everything they hear is true.
It's just too
because
much.
It's being covered up by the DOJ.
The Republicans have lost all credibility on redactions after re-traumatizing countless victims by releasing unredacted countless pictures and information about these women while covering up the men and holding back the information on Donald Trump. The damage is done.
Well,
this has been botched Bondi style. It is bad.
It has been botched terribly. And there are a lot of Republicans and people in the White House who wonder why a lot of these people still have their jobs.
It's a good question.
But again, the information is getting out there. 9 months ago, they should have gotten ahead of it. They didn't listen to us. And things just get worse by the day.